Okay, Sally, let's begin.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Another year, another audit committee.
Morning.
So Jennifer Files and Brian Newland are here from Yunt, Hyde and Barber, and they're gonna talk us through the audit process, the scope and the general extent of the audit. We will again have a single audit because of our federal funding that we received this year. Jennifer will talk about that. And then typically the committee does pick an area of interest to focus on. So a suggestion, you can have no functional area of emphasis, but you could also have a review of our new S4 system access as a suggestion or something else that the committee comes up with. So let us know what that might be. And with that, I will hand it over to Jennifer and Brian.
We are actually a good ways into the process already. We're, second week of February and Sally and her team have done a great job. We've scheduled field work a little bit earlier, or I guess really on schedule, on the same timeline as last year, which last year was a little earlier than normal. Historically, your audit's been the last 2 weeks of March, and we're scheduled for the first 2 weeks of March. And we've already begun our planning process, our risk assessment. A lot of the information to allow us to do that has already been provided by the finance team, so they are in great shape. Still going to be a few other things that come through, accounts to be reconciled, WRC information to come, which is always usually the last piece of the puzzle number wise. But we'll be working through the completion of planning over the next 2 weeks, and then move right into what is defined as field work the first week of March. So yeah, we're off to a great start. Excited to work with the team again and to get through the process. As Sally mentioned, we in addition to the normal financial statement audit, we will be conducting the single audit again. The threshold for single audit requirement is $1 million for you for this year end, and you will exceed that expenditure threshold. So we will conduct the audit. But as we've talked about in the past, Loudon Water will still qualify as a low risk auditee, which simply makes it a little less painful for your finance team to endure. But all of the same things are still tested. The internal controls over financial reporting and compliance, making sure that everything has been done according with the grant agreements and laws and regulations. So it'll still be a full scope compliance audit. And we're already off to the races on that because the programs that you're spending on have been the same as they have been last year. So those risk assessments are already complete. But yeah, we welcome your suggestions, recommendations. If you have questions or concerns that you would like for us to incorporate into this audit process, or a special section that you would like for us to address specifically, we're open and still able to accommodate any questions or requests to be able to report back to you at the exit conference.
Should have asked the committee to approve the agenda. I have a motion to approve the agenda. Okay, I moved. Okay, okay. Doing things a little backwards here. Thank you. Okay, sure. Yep. You
So
should.
I'd like to explore the system. Of course, that's always worth focusing on. Me, kind of Mark Oblis and me, I always
Like to look at hourly billing and just keep an eye on that. Those are the two things that when I read through.
Yeah, but
Looked at last year.
and by the new system, we are on S4HANA version of SAP.
The S4HANA. Okay.
Now, so last year we were in transition, which is why we did the audit
Yeah.
early. And then, so this is the first audit on the new system. So the thought was you could check access, you could check, I don't know, the balances, transfer.
It keeps track of everything.
Yeah, so that was
Every penny.
what the new system is.
Yeah, so we're doing the the S4HANA, it is worth looking at. And then I always like to think about, the hourly billing. We have so many professional contracts that there's a lot of hourly billing. It's just one of those things that I think about. Doesn't keep me awake at night, but it's important.
You mean that we are billed or that we're billing?
No, we're being
We're
billed.
paying?
We're paying
paying.
for professional services, engineering, hourly billing for inspections outside the company, that kind of thing.
Okay.
There's a lot of details in there. That's my opinion. I don't know what other board members think. So.
If I may, just real quick, we did go through a similar exercise with system access when we moved from Munis to SAP around 2014, 2015. They did look at that as part of that transition. So that would be a similar exercise. A couple of years ago, at Mr. Koblis's request, YHB did do some research into the billings that you're talking about and found that everything checked out. So that was fairly recent. We could certainly work with them again to do that, but I just wanted to let you know it was fairly
If we've just
recent.
done it,
Yeah.
then maybe there's something else that maybe may be good for the focus. But I,
Maybe it's just a report that we don't have to get the auditors involved, right? Maybe it's just something that you guys could piece together and provide it to the committee, just showing what much we bill out for legal, bill out for professional services, inspections, things like that. Does that make sense?
Well, are we talking about
how much we're billed.
how much we're billed from like a Black and Veatch?
Correct.
You're right. I think part of that's in your BOA quarterly report, but I think if you're looking for more detail than that and including something like legal fees, we could certainly look into that for you. Sure.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
like to see legal fees. I'm
Okay.
curious about
Sure.
Legal fees, yeah.
But you would just like staff to
Yeah.
take that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that is a great question because there is a bridge between what external audit is, what your management team does. You don't currently have an internal audit function per se structured. But that is something that, as you continue to grow and evolve, and if the committee has questions on specific things, certainly we're always of service if you need us or have concerns. There are certainly things that your finance team can do, but they are also overseeing that information. So there might be times where you have requests for information or more detailed analysis or testing that might be more in the realm of what I consider like an internal audit function, independent of your finance team, but still not necessarily external audit level testing and reporting.
So when is it appropriate? Is there like an asset size, a head count, when companies move some of the audit functions internally? Is there some benchmarks for that question?
I don't know that there's a hard and fast rule for when you should consider internal audit. It certainly doesn't make sense for organizations that are smaller. Loudon might be to the point where there might be things, depending on your reporting. I mean, you have an amazing finance team here and management team that reports, you could structure. So I'm not saying it's necessary, but certainly as you continue to grow, it might be something that management and the board may think is worthwhile to have a bridge between if you want insights, reports, or things that are independent of your finance team or operations team, you can certainly look into it. But there is some cost to it, and there's different options. You can hire and create that internally. You can also outsource it so that you don't have to pay full-time staff and salaries and have it as needed, more of a quarterly or semi-annual type service. So there's lots of options if you, as a committee, think that you have things that you want insights beyond the people who are creating or owning the data. There's a middle ground between external and management team. But I don't know. I can look at the GFOA and see if they have any recommendations for it, for actual size wise, but I'm not aware of anything that says once you hit a certain size that it makes.
I wonder if some of the utilities do that or not. I'm just spitballing.
We can do some research and ask our peers kind of what they do. I'm not aware of others that have an internal audit of our size, but that doesn't mean we
So
can't.
do we have any audit people on staff right now in the finance department?
No. Just all the accounting staff that help with the audit, but no, yeah.
I think
Which is
we
significant.
had an internal audit
Mhm.
office, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I'm assuming like a WSSC and a DC Water they probably have their own internal audit staff.
Seems that if you were finding like issues or kind of consistently that say, well, gee, there's some weakness there, maybe you want to think about an internal audit of some sort.
Yes, Loudon Water does not have reoccurring issues
Right.
or findings or anything like that of that nature. Certainly, if you did, that recommendation would have come before. You have no requirement to have that level of in-house service. It's really the cost benefit of, does the board or committees have enough questions that they want an independent, but yet not an external perspective or testing of it? Sometimes, again, as you continue to grow, if your finance team will need to grow as the organization grows. Sometimes companies will keep that finance team a little bit smaller, but have an internal function that can also serve as a bridge, either one, to keep your audit fees down, because they'll provide things to your external auditors in lieu of the auditors doing those pieces, or two, to help with some of the internal preparation that your finance team does. Your current finance team does it very well, but they do a lot beyond just closing the books and the reconciliations, providing work papers and the support and answering all the questions. They prepare the ACFR. All of those things are done within your finance team now. And from my perspective, done very well. But as their responsibilities continue to grow, as the organization continues to grow, if that capacity is still not there, there's a lot of different options. Like some organizations have completely outsourced their ACFR prep because it's a heavy lift. It's a big document. It takes a lot of time. Not all finance departments have that resource in-house to be able to do it as quickly as it's needed. So you can outsource that. You can outsource some of the testing and the questions. There's a lot of different options that are available. But right now, from my perspective, your finance team is managing it very well. They're responsive and timely, and it's a very clean and smooth audit process. So I have no concerns. But it is something to consider as the organization continues to grow.
And as a reminder, we have a great system internally where monthly we're closing the books and we're reconciling to the GL. So a lot of the schedules that are required for the audit, we're doing monthly. And that's not me, right? That's the team of finance. And I should give a shout out. I think Donna's online today. Donna Kovalyak is our accounting manager. So she's the one actually managing the requests, doling them out. We'll do the ACFR together, but she leads all that. So.
Well, something to think about for the future.
Are there any GASB issuances or regulatory agencies that are
New gas,
new?
Yeah, we do have coming up. I don't think it's this year that we can adopt it early in the management area. We have to make sure that we're actually giving analysis in that section. I don't know that we'll have to change too much from what I read on that one. And then something with the assets is coming up too, where we have to break out more of the ins and outs. But I don't think there's any huge changes for this year.
No, there's nothing significant for this year. No new adoptions. Everything big is complete. There's a few that are upcoming, but again, from what I've looked at so far, I don't think there'll be any significant changes to your ACFR from them.
You look at regulatory agencies as well, other than outside of what GASB is asking, from DEQ or.
For the most part, for the external audit, we're focused on laws, regulations, grant agreements, and then the financial reporting things through GASB.
Okay.
Anything that compliance-wise, if there's any compliance issues, we get that information from management and incorporate it in to make sure there's not a control deficiency as it relates to processes, mainly in financial reporting. So, plant compliance issues, we'll get some information on those, but operation compliance findings really aren't the scope of the financial statement audit unless they were to have a financial impact because of a fine or fees or so forth. But we do look at anything that would impact internal controls over financial reporting or the dollars and cents of the operations. And anything that would be in a grant agreement, because you do have that compliance audit. Anything that would be required reporting wise, whether financial or otherwise, we do make sure that all of those are done and done timely.
We don't have many grants, right? We have the FEMA grant.
The Loudoun County ARPA grant
The
and then the
ARPA stuff.
FEMA grant.
That's still around, ARPA.
Mhm.
Still over $1 million.
I think it's gonna expire though, is what Amelia was saying.
Yeah.
So we'll have to pay back what we haven't spent.
So I,
We can't spend that.
So the ARPA money went to Loudoun County and they doled out, I think $3 million-ish to us to help with the Peonian Springs Waterford project. And so we have a deadline to use up that fund, all the funds that were transferred to us. And just because of the nature of the project and some of the delays, we're not going to be able to use all of that. So we have to send that back to the county and then the county can use that on,
How much should we not spend?
we spent a lot on engineering
It's-
so far, haven't we?
Yeah, we just approved the CIP.
Yeah.
yes, you did. But like we have this is our deadline is this fiscal year and we're not going to be able to spend all of that.
So
Yeah,
the,
By June.
yeah,
the construction services that we just approved, that's gonna be covered by ARPA.
a portion of it, I believe. Yes, yeah. hmm
It's spending.
I think there's 2 million left if I had to
Yeah.
guess.
Wow.
I think that's close.
Wow, it's a big number. So the last question that I had was, you mentioned the HANA S4.
Mhm.
So, but we do a review of IT and SCADA in every audit, or do we not?
Yeah, so part of our responsibility in conducting the financial statement audit is to understand all of the different areas of all of the different systems that flow into financial reporting. So for the financial audit, our lens is what systems impact the financial statements. So to that extent, we do look at IT general controls on the corporate network. We do also make some inquiries and look and test some controls on the SCADA network. I would not call it a comprehensive review or an audit of the SCADA system, simply because that doesn't necessarily flow into the financial statements. But we do look at IT general controls around the SAP system, as well as some typical processes, right? How do you add users to the system? How do you remove users from the system? And then we sort of look at checkpoints along the way. The request here on the new S4 system is expanded, so that's not part of our normal audit process. Yeah, so that would we would want to work with management on scoping that to make sure that we're looking at either specific users or groups or permission levels that they're interested in and have the biggest impact on financial reporting. So, maybe we limit it to just those users in accounting, certain segregation of duties, conflicts. So yeah, we would want to work with management to scope that a little bit more clearly before we really dug into that. But yeah, so there's really two components: the financial supporting financial statement aspect, and then the additional testing that you're asking for around the S4 system.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, any questions?
Okay, I think we're good. Sounds like you're off and running.
We're off to a great start. Thank you. And
Right.
thank you, Donna.
Thank you very much.
There's no motion required today. Is that correct?
No?
Yep. Okay.
Okay. As usual, then, as long as everything goes well, we'll see you back here at the exit conference to report the results of the process. But certainly, if anything is identified before then, we will be in touch with the committee before that point. We will not wait till the end. But as of right now, I have nothing that leads me that will be the case. But here we are.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for the drive too.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. It's nice to get out of the office once in a while.
Motion to adjourn. I'll make the motion.
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's, I need, if you reviewed the agenda, I need a, approval of the agenda.
I motion to approve the agenda as presented.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We have no action items and we have, a major, informational item on PFAS. So start with Mark and we'll get into it.
Very good. Well, thank you and welcome to the Water Resource Committee. We got an early version this year. And, as a kind of a reminder, what we've really done with this committee is utilize this as a venue for topics that, lots of things are happening and there's not action-oriented things here for the board, but so getting into some more depth on some of these issues. And in particular, late last year, our team, recognized that there's a lot going on with biosolids and sort of things around with PFAS. And in particular, this year in the legislative session, it's really sort of proved so far, and we knew going in, it's really one of the biggest challenges we're facing and lots of conversation and things going on with this. So what we wanted to do is have this meeting to really go into a little bit more depth. And then, as you recall, last year in the monthly board meeting here during the winter season, when the legislative process is ongoing, we've added a monthly report. So we'll provide, continued conversation about activities going on in the legislative session. But doing this up front and in advance of that, we'll give a little bit more context and we've got more time to do that. So a lot happening here. Lots of conversation in Richmond. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Kendra's going to lead it with Jennifer's help and just getting into some things related, particularly biosolids, but the PFAS world here.
All right. So when it comes to biosolids in general, and definitely with PFAS and biosolids, there can be a lot of concern and sometimes blame because people have a negative reaction to biosolids in general. So today we wanted to walk you all through, again, some of the basics that I know we've talked to you about on what biosolids are, what PFAS is, but most importantly, what the state of the research is showing on land application of biosolids with relation to PFAS, the state of the regulations as they are right now. As Mark mentioned, they're changing rapidly. There will be committee meetings at the state level today on these regulations. And then we want to talk a lot about Loudon Water's efforts and how we are handling the approach on this. It wasn't on the agenda, but Jen is going to cover part of the presentation today. But Jen is now our program director for water reclamation. She has come up through the ranks through Broad Run and was our first PM on the Phase 3 project. She served as the program manager and now as the program director. We're really excited and confident that her leadership of that team is really going to continue our excellence in operations at Broad Run.
Well, thank you. As Kendra mentioned, I'm going to run through some background today to provide to set Kendra up for the rest of the presentation. So first of all, what are biosolids? So I think in a lot of the public conversation around PFAS and biosolids, there perhaps seems to be a misconception on what exactly are biosolids. So it's really important to point out that biosolids are not raw sewage. Biosolids are not poop. So just throwing it out there. Biosolids are in fact an end product. So one of the end products from the wastewater treatment process. So just to walk you through that, we have our process flow diagram of Broad Run up here, which I know you've seen several times, but solids are produced at multiple points in the treatment process and primary clarifiers and also in the biological reactor basins. Those solids are removed and they're separated from the liquid stream and they're treated separately. So at Broad Run right now, we have an anaerobic digestion process for solids treatment. The goal of anaerobic digestion is to stabilize the solids and to reduce the pathogens that are in the solids. So anaerobic digestion is a biological treatment process. The microbes in the digesters, they really break down the organic components of the solids. And then the digesters are heated. So they're heated to about 95, 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Solids are retained in the digesters for 15 to 18 days, and that really achieves the pathogen reduction requirements for solids. So in the end, out of the anaerobic digestion process, we get a nice
So,
biosolids
excuse me,
product.
how does that happen? Can you get into a little bit more detail? So the solids go into the anaerobic digesters and they get heated up to 98, 99 degrees. They sit there for 10 days.
About 15 to 18 days.
And
So
then
the
what's the process that's actually happening for those 18 days?
Yeah, so the inside the anaerobic digesters themselves, we hold the solids and we mix the solids, we heat the solids, and then the reactions are carried out in the digester
Do
with
we
the,
add anything to that process?
no, we don't add anything to that process.
There's
No.
no catalyst?
It's,
there's no-
yeah, we just let
Natural
the-
occurring biology,
Mhm.
just like in your stomach, the bacteria in your stomach are breaking it down. We've just got large quantities of that bacteria. So it's really another biological process, just like the liquid stream process.
So the stuff that's going into the digesters, what is it? I know it's a bunch of different things. I know it's probably mud and waste and human waste, but
Mhm.
can you give me some percentages of what the material is going in there?
Percentages is going to be a little bit tougher because I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but it is a mix of easily settable solids that I'm going to talk about. And you named all of those. That's in the primary sludge. But I had to pick a number, I'd probably say 40 to 50% of it is the biomass that we produce that treats the liquid stream. When we went on the tour of Broad Run, you guys looked in the tank and it looked like chocolate milk, right? All of that is microbiology. It is some particulate material, but living microorganisms. And that is what is consuming the nitrogen and the phosphorus out of the wastewater. We waste those to the digester. And it's just a lot of biology. It's a diverse mix of things. And when it's in the wastewater, it's cold, right? It's about 20 degrees C. When we heat it up, different microbiology do different things, right? And we heat a digester almost to body temperature, right? Because our body is doing the same thing. But to your point, where do they come from? They exist in nature, they exist in streams. We just concentrate it at a really, really high concentration
So
of
they're
it.
all bacteria, basically.
Mhm.
That's all
Different
they are.
kinds, protozoa, all kinds of things.
You have to have biology to create a.
This is biological engineering,
Uh-huh.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And this is a process flow diagram of Broad Run. This is what we do here, but anaerobic digestion is very common for municipal treatment applications as it is a very reliable method for stabilizing solids and reducing the pathogens. So again, very common there.
Thank you.
Just to throw it in on the PFAS front, they're actually looking at anaerobic digesters now, and there's likely some biology in there that could probably break down PFAS.
So what
Break down the
microplastics?
unbreakable.
But it's just really slow, right? So then once you find them, you have to figure out how to grow them and get them in enough concentration because these are such complex microbiologies, everything's competing with each other. So the engineering we do is how do we create an environment to grow the ones we don't and discourage the ones grow the ones we want and discourage the ones that we
What
don't.
about microplastics? Does that figure into this process at all? Or is that a tougher thing to?
So microplastics, I mean, they exist and they're everywhere. PFAS isn't a plastic, right? PFAS is a chemical and we're going to refresh ourselves on what PFAS is. But I would say people are finding it a similar concern to PFAS where really hard to treat for. And there is nothing at Broad Run that's treating for microplastics right now.
But the end product from digestion, it has a lot of beneficial properties. So it's an organic material. It is very nutrient rich, has a lot of macronutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, a lot of micronutrients. So it really makes it an optimal fertilizer for agricultural purposes. So that's why you see biosolids used as a fertilizer and land applied on farmland. And land application of biosolids it's a very common process in the United States and in Virginia. About 2/3 of the municipal biosolids that are produced are actually land applied. That said, biosolids are only land applied to a very small portion of agricultural land in Virginia. So in 2024, only about 0.5% of agricultural land in Virginia had biosolids land applied to it. And I think when you look at land application and how that works, it's really important to point out that the whole process, there's a lot of oversight that's provided by Virginia DEQ. And so biosolids can only be land applied to land that is permitted by DEQ. And DEQ monitors the land application process. They hire inspectors, that they train inspectors to go out and verify that land application is happening in accordance with state regulations. State regulations are actually more stringent than federal regulations when it comes to the land application process. So in Virginia, there's more stringent regulations around setbacks, like how far away land application needs to occur from water bodies, from wells, things like that. And so a lot of oversight into the application process itself. There's also a lot of oversight into the quality of the biosolid. So here at Broad Run, we have to report on the quality of the biosolid. We have to verify that the treatment process happens in accordance with regulations. And we analyze for things like metals to ensure that the quality of the biosolids meets the regulation. Also want to note that DEQ, they track any complaints that come in regarding biosolids. So if there's any public complaints regarding biosolids, then they track those and they follow up on those. So last year, I think they had 11 complaints total that were filed. They followed up on all of those. Only 8 of them were actually related to biosolids, and only 2 of them required corrective action. So again, DEQ provides a lot of oversight into how land application happens and the quality. Our land applier, one thing I did want to mention, that our contractor that performs land application, they actually perform their own independent analysis of biosolids. So they do an independent analysis to ensure that the quality meets standards. And so, yeah. And so really the purpose of all of the oversight and the regulation is protection of human health, right? So that gets us to the next point.
Question.
Yeah, of course. Mhm.
Loudoun County stopped that 27 years, property I had before where I live now, 27, 28 years ago. There was a vegetable farm, big vegetable farm there, and they used biosolids. They had to go to all the abutters all around and ask,
Mhm.
is that okay? Are you comfortable with that?
Mhm.
They all said yes, and lived through 2 weeks of hell. After they put it down, I heard recently that Loudoun County has kind of discontinued that. I don't, probably because there's houses on that land that used to have big vegetable farm, and probably because encroachment of all the houses and so forth. Is it
You're
county by
asking about
county?
that one specific farm?
No,
Okay.
is it county by county? I mean, the state is very strict on the regulations and the application and so forth, but can a county kind of opt out and say, no, we're not doing that? We're not allowing that anymore.
There is some proposed legislation this year, looking to give a county that ability, not to say you can't apply biosolids at all, because that is at DEQ state, but to require additional restrictions for PFAS in specific.
Yeah.
I think what they're trying to work through in that legislation is the administration of that, right? Because a county then has to have all the staff that Jen just described on monitoring these sites, sampling them, and it even changes DEQ's administrative approach. So I think it's to be seen where that ends up.
But I'm not sure, I'm not aware of the Loudoun County or even at a county level, sort of putting a stop to it. I'm not sure. I don't know what that situation is. But I think that's what we're dealing with at the state level right now, is looking at that. But I'm not sure at the county level, unless there was some kind of ordinance process, but I'm not sure they've done that.
Jack has a question.
Yeah, does
all the applications stay in Loudoun? Does it go to Frederick County? Does it go to Shenandoah Valley? How far does it travel?
Yeah, it travels really throughout the state. It's
Yeah.
really up to our land applier to determine
Because
where
we,
biosolids are applied.
Synagro is our current contractor and they apply statewide. So really none of Loudon Water's biosolids are applied here in Loudoun County. Most of it is applied more southern in the state where there's more.
And does any of that go to Maryland?
No, the majority, I mean, ours definitely stays in Virginia, but between Virginia and Maryland, biosolids flow from Maryland into Virginia because we have more land, not really the other way around.
And there's a lot of work that's done to determine how much biosolids can be applied to an agricultural property. That's governed by nutrient management plans and soil quality. So there's a lot of work done on an agricultural plot to determine, okay, given the nutrient content of the biosolid, how much can we actually land apply? So there is a lot of work that goes into determining, how much biosolid can be applied where, and perhaps, that might restrict where biosolids can be applied just in general.
Thank you.
Okay, so PFAS. I know there's been some discussions on PFAS, but just a few reminders. So PFAS is a chemical that is used in the manufacture of many different products that we use on a daily basis, and primarily in products that are intended to be waterproof or to be grease-proof. So it's used in a lot of makeup. It's used in firefighting foams, fast food packaging and wrapping. And PFAS is also used in the manufacture of pesticides. So pesticides, when they're sprayed on agricultural, on plants, the PFAS helps to prevent the pesticide from washing away. So just wanted to point out that it's even used in pesticides. The trademark of the PFAS compound is the carbon to fluorine bond. That is very strong. And so PFAS is not easily destroyed. So the treatment process, the wastewater treatment process, even the advanced process that we have here at Broad Run does not destroy PFAS. But we do see some transformation of the chemical throughout the treatment process, perhaps from a longer chain to a shorter chain. But given the really strong the strong bonds in the compound, it is really very ubiquitous in the environment. So it is everywhere. And I think, as we're all aware, there are some connections between PFAS and concerns around impacts to human health. And I think it's also important to provide some context on the units of PFAS. So when we typically come in and talk about nutrient concentrations, we talk in terms of like milligrams per liter or parts per million. But here with units of PFAS, we are talking about trace amounts of PFAS in materials. And so, for example, 1 part per trillion, units of PFAS are sometimes given in parts per trillion. That is equivalent to a single drop of water in 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So we're talking about trying to detect and monitor PFAS in these trace quantities. So that's just to give you some context on what 1 part per trillion looks like. And then also a nice photo of what biosolids look like. So they look a lot like soil. So then in terms of the PFAS pathway to biosolids, so how does PFAS actually make its way into biosolids? So in order for that to happen, PFAS has to make its way to the influent of a wastewater treatment plant. As I mentioned, wastewater treatment does not destroy PFAS. So a lot of it is, transformed in the process. Some of it adheres to the biosolid. But how PFAS makes its way to the treatment plant, there's a couple different routes. And I think what we're finding as an industry right now is that the majority of the PFAS is actually coming from residential homes. So as I mentioned, we use products that contain PFAS, like a lot of clothing. We wash our clothes. That PFAS makes its way to the collection system, to the treatment plant. So residential sources are a huge, residential locations are a huge source of PFAS. Industrial applications are also, yes.
How does PFAS get into the system? Do they is there a specific chemical that they use in the process that results in PFAS? I mean,
PFAS is used itself in the manufacture, like in the manufacture of clothing that is water resistant.
but
And-
PFAS is a chemical. In other words, they don't put something into the product that results in PFAS. You're saying PFAS is the chemical that you put in.
Yeah.
You know, like Scotch Guard spray that you'd put on your shoes to try to make them waterproof. That's basically PFAS that you're spraying onto your shoes.
So PFAS is the chemical.
Mhm.
And it is used in so much of the materials that we consume. So industrial manufacturers like that use PFAS in their products, they can potentially be a major contributor of PFAS into a wastewater treatment plant. Fortunately, here at Loudoun County, we don't have that much of that industry. So most of the PFAS that makes its way into Broad Run is really coming from those residential homes. Also, landfills are another potential source of PFAS. All of the products that we use that contain PFAS, we dispose of them, put them in the landfill. It rains, that collects the PFAS itself, and that leaves the landfill in the leachate. Leachate from landfill is treated here at Broad Run. So landfills are another potential source of PFAS making its way into a wastewater facility. So again, PFAS makes its way into the collection system via residential homes, industry, landfills, gets into the treatment process, and PFAS can adhere to biosolids, and biosolids are hauled for land application. So this is how PFAS makes its way into biosolids.
Can we touch on that for just a second? We had talked some years ago about a pretreatment facility at the landfill.
Mhm.
Where does all that sit now?
Yeah, and we've got more on it like later on in the presentation as well. But what we've done is we've spent a lot of time trying to understand essentially what PFAS is coming from where and what's happening within Broad Run. So we've got extensive sampling within the plant to understand the transformation. But the more data we've gathered, and we started back in 2001, so we're 5 years in on this, and what it looks like right now is 90% of the PFAS entering Broad Run is coming from residential sources. We went into the collection system and sampled groups of homes, right? And we looked at different styles of homes to see what was coming. When we sampled just the landfill flow, which we've done, it's maybe 2% of the PFAS load into our facility. Now, if you notice the math, there's another 8% that hasn't been identified, but we don't believe it's a missing source. It's hard to measure PFAS in wastewater. So to us, it just looks like inaccuracy in just various numbers that can't kind of close that mass balance. But the landfill being such a small source, and we're going to show you where Broad Run is relative to a lot of different limits. What it looks like right now is if we completely took out the landfill, we wouldn't actually notice much difference in what we see at Broad Run. That does not mean we haven't stopped, working with the landfill. We've actually been partnering with them, and they've allowed us SCADA access to their flow data, because that's what's important, is that the more flow we get, the larger they're going to be on that percentage. So we wanted to understand in more detail. So we've got that, really minute by minute analysis now of their flows to make sure that we're understanding where this is going. And really just last year did EPA certify the PFAS testing method that applies to leachate and biosolids. And there is some movement in all of this in the bills in the legislature right now. So it's really a monitor for us in that they're a small contribution because they keep things tight and they're just a very, very small flow. And it's really us weighing the cost of treatment and the timing to ensure that we're moving forward with the right technology at the right time for the overall benefit.
Great answer. That's very comprehensive. Thank you.
It'd be interesting to know, like, what are the residential homes doing. I mean, obviously, I have a Gore-Tex jacket. Not many people wash those. I mean, that, I haven't washed my ski jacket like in 20
You're
years.
supposed to, you're supposed to, Terry.
But, you know, could it be coming from as a Teflon plans that they're cleaning every
Yeah.
night? It would be great to somehow figure out.
All those cosmetics that you put on your body have them in there too. It's
But
just.
don't you just use like
So
a,
many things.
don't use like a makeup cleaning and throw them in the trash?
Right. It's like also in the
But
lid.
then-
Yeah.
Right?
No, no, I was just saying. You know, maybe there's some educational element, you know, for the residential home. Say, look, we've noticed that you're contributing more PFAS to everybody, and here's the products that you're using every day that you don't know, like you're washing throw your Teflon pan away.
Right.
Get rid of it. That
But
would,
there's some effort to remove these from the environment also. I mean, the
Yeah.
manufacturers are
Yeah.
trying not to use them.
And that's just gonna take time.
Yep.
The other thing is, I'm gonna say the ubiquitousness of it. So when we started getting into our crop studies, which we're gonna talk about and such, you know, it's actually in pretty high concentrations in the rain now. So it's in all water entering the collection system as well. One of the samples that came out of the rain had PFOS, right, above the 4 nanograms per liter, which is the MCL for drinking water, right? So it's just everywhere at this point.
that's in the rain.
Mhm.
It's in the rain?
Is there any research going on that can neutralize the PFAS that combined with PFAS?
There is research all over the place on destructive technologies for PFAS, and I'm not gonna say it's easy to do. They're able to do it when you have a high concentration of PFAS. What is hard is when you've got a trace amount of PFAS. Those destructive technologies work if you can concentrate it into one really high concentrated stream. We don't have anything yet when there's one PPT that we can get at that one.
What about filtering it? Is that the same thing?
So granular activated carbon filtration, right, is the common technology used to remove PFAS from large volumes of water. So most drinking water plants that aren't able to meet the current PFAS MCL are looking at that type of filtration. It just consumes a ton of carbon because it's at such small concentrations. You have to place that carbon all the time. So people are now looking at, do we have enough carbon for this level of treatment? Or you have to go as far as reverse osmosis, which not only is a very costly technology, but produces a large brine volume when you do it at mass scales. And then we have to try to figure out how to dispose of the brine from the reverse osmosis.
No, we have neighbors of ours that, you know, installed this reverse osmosis in their sink, their
Yeah.
drinking water sink, under their sink, and they were telling everybody that you should be doing that.
Right, which works just fine on your sink because the brine just goes down the drain, right? But at a mass scale, we have to do something with that brine, which becomes a really big challenge.
Do you guys recommend reverse osmosis for homes?
I would say it depends on where you live. The public drinking water supply here at Loudon Water and in Leesburg, there's, you know, unmeasurable PFAS in those water sources. I would say, you know, there is legislature on a larger testing program for private wells in Virginia, right? Private wells would probably be recommended for testing and evaluation.
Does reverse osmosis work on microplastics?
Yes, reverse osmosis is going to take everything out.
Just hit H2O.
Yes, well, it sounds like that's.
Yeah.
A way to go.
Yeah.
Okay, so
The tractor.
back to the biosolids. Yes. You know, the concern with PFAS and biosolids really came up in the early 2020s when reports of farms that had measurable PFAS in their crops, in the dairy, you know, in the cattle themselves. And it really sparked moves in several states to just ban land application. And as a wastewater industry, right, that was concerning because there is not enough landfill capacity, right? To just say, let's landfill all biosolids that we produce. So the industry quickly mobilized to say it is imperative that we understand how large scale this problem is, how the PFAS is moving throughout these structures, and what the solutions are going to be. And this is, for our own longevity. We couldn't just say, oh, this problem isn't us, this is something else. We really wanted to move quickly towards a solution because the wastewater industry as a whole, we want to ensure that biosolids remain beneficial and renewable. I think when we push for land application, it can sometimes be seen as we just want to put biosolids on land no matter what. And that is not where we're going. We want the right biosolids in the right place because this nitrogen and phosphorus is a value in the environment. So the first studies that started coming out, wanted to show the relative risk. You guys have seen this. Your questions really show that you're aware of this, right? The concentrations that we're exposed to in our household sources are much, much higher than what is in a municipal biosolid. So this graph was first put out in California. They were the first state to show a lot of, potential legislative action. And so that biosolids number is what we call municipal. There's not an industrial impact to that. That is reflective of the biosolids that just come from wastewater from homes. And it is a small risk compared to things that we are consuming directly. And biosolids is a very indirect exposure path, even compared to drinking water, right? Where we're going to drink that directly. But Michigan was the first state to really publish statewide, all their major wastewater treatment plants, what PFAS is in those biosolids. And what the data clearly showed is most of the biosolids have very, very high levels, but they had a few problems. And those problems are the industrial contaminated biosolids. And that is also what was found in the main land crops, right? Is paper mills use a lot of PFAS. Those often can be labeled as biosolids, so people don't know if they're getting a municipal solid or an industrial solid. But if that paper mill discharges to the wastewater treatment plant, it's all labeled the same. But the data shows all biosolids are not equal. We've put broad run on the graph. It's too tiny to see right now, but we're going to zoom into it later on and really get into the details. But the Michigan approach was, we've got to stop the high concentrations immediately. Those are what the landfill is for. Michigan took a pretreatment approach. They went back upstream to all those industries, removed the flows from the wastewater treatment plants, and have amazing statistics where they've reduced PFAS and biosolids like by 80%.
What they do with those flows?
They have to treat them. So they put the reverse osmosis on or the GAC, but again, it's in a much smaller flow there than treating the entire wastewater treatment plant, right?
They're treating it at the source.
Yes, yes. Which works for those industrial ones. I think there may be too much hope for industrial pretreatment at the lower concentrations, right? Where we can't get all of that out.
Kendra, real quick, the previous slide, foundation, what was that?
That's the makeup that you put on your face.
Okay.
They wanted to not wash off.
I don't use that. So I'm thinking, no, that doesn't look like a foundation. I'm thinking concrete. Okay.
Yeah, my poor teen daughters are living a rough life because they're not allowed to wear waterproof makeup. And I'm like, it's okay. It'll be all right.
So it's the waterproof makeup, is that right?
Yes.
Wow.
Kendra, in the
Sweat it
Michigan,
off, you want it
Yeah.
to,
Go swimming with it. yeah.
in the Michigan case, how are they addressing the brine byproduct?
There are disposal sites that you can take it to. I don't know them in detail enough what the industrial sources are doing with them, but there also are hazardous waste facilities where you can take high concentrations of PFAS for disposal. It's basically just incinerated, and there's a lot of science right now about how much PFAS is going into the air, which is why we're finding it in the rain. So there's discussions now at how high of a temperature you have to incinerate something to break the fluorine carbon bond. And it's just higher than we were incinerating previously.
The reason I ask is, we talk a lot about salinization and drinking water. And are we just kicking that
a can, another can down another road.
Yeah,
Did you say they find it in rain?
PFAS and rain, yeah.
In trace parts, up to 4 parts per trillion.
Just gonna
Right.
start a pickling operation.
Right, and most brines are generated on the coast, which go into the ocean, which is just gonna recycle. You know,
Into the
we've
rain.
got to get it to a way that we can destroy
Is
it.
it in my pool?
Um,
Rainwater gets in there.
Yeah, but it would be trace. So what the temperature for incineration to destroy the, fluorine
ooh, I
bond?
do not know that
Oh,
temperature off the top of
Just
my
curious.
head.
I'm sure I can look it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about lipstick? I mean, you're applying it to your lips, you know, your taste, that you think you're just giving yourself PFAS.
You are. So part of the alarm for PFAS, even before the 2020s with the biosolids, PFAS first came to national prominence because it's in people's blood. And they said, well, if it's in our bloodstream, where is it coming from? And then they started looking for it. But what they found is since PFOA and PFAS were banned nationally, those concentrations are going down in our blood. But yes, it's in all of us right now.
Which when we had this conversation 2 years ago or whatever,
Right.
and Kendra did a good job of saying, no, Brent, we shouldn't. stop."
Landfill our
Yeah. But the real solution was stop making the stuff and stop
Yeah.
using it. I mean, that's the only solution. Ultimately, but that has such consequences for so many things. It's like going back a century in terms of what you're wearing and what you're, cast iron, like my great grandmother and all this kind of stuff. And it feels like, oh man, we're going backwards, but maybe going backwards means going forward. So
The chemistry is also phenomenally complicated. So PFAS is actually like 16,000 different chemicals. And, 1633 is our test method right now. It measures for 44 of those, right? And what we found is we can measure for like all potential fluorine that is out there, but we can't measure those 16,000. So when you try to regulate it, they just pick another chemical down the line that maybe has a different fluorine carbon arrangement that now we can't measure. But we see them coming into Broad Run. So one of the fun statistics is there is no measurable PFOS entering Broad Run, but there is PFOS in our biosolids. Where did it come from? It transformed from other types of PFAS into that because wastewater treatment is an oxidative process. So we can break it into smaller pieces. We just can't fully destroy it. So even the regulation is such a hard battle.
So just to repeat what you said, we can measure 44, 44 of the 16,000
Yeah.
variants. So it's just scratching the surface.
Correct.
And as you make certain compounds illegal, you go, great, we'll just change the recipe a little bit and now we're good.
Mhm.
Lovely.
Just gotta get resistant to it.
We will evolve, right? After enough time.
I'll look it up. I'm good. But
Okay.
The thought came to me with the different freon compounds, air conditioning compounds, those use a fluoride bond. And they're not supposed to, the technicians recover them, but many of the air conditioners break. Is that contributing to it?
Freon is different chemically than PFAS. So it's all just in how they're arranged.
So it breaks down
Yeah.
naturally then.
So the legislation can't just deal with it wholesale, all 16,000 umbrella, regardless of what little, you can't
Well-
address it that way?
And in the product bans, well, we'd have to talk to an attorney about that one.
But EPA or DEQ, when they're talking about this stuff and they say you got a limit of 4 parts per trillion, is that all PFAS or it's only these 44, these 10 or these 3?
The way the legal system works, it has to be specific. You have to be able to measure it, and EPA has to have a certifiable test method to measure it. So the fact that we don't have methods for all those others means that EPA can't regulate it
So
until
this
they
is
have a.
innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
Which is like the opposite of how land use and zoning works. Everything is automatically, if you're not specifically permitted.
Yeah.
The default is you're not allowed. That feels like a more appropriate way to address something like this.
Really?
Maybe the only way.
If you're really gonna stop it.
Yeah, which kind of is the whole point, I think, unless we're just like doing this for the facade of it.
Well, I would definitely say, with biosolids, there's work to be done here, but there is a how much work to what benefit that I think we have to talk about as a society because it's everywhere. So once the issue became very apparent, most of the utilities in the Virginia area, but even nationwide, pulled together for this study. We wanted a nationwide study, so looking at all kinds of different soil characteristics, but land application of municipal only biosolids. All the data was coming from those really high concentration scenarios. So we needed to be able to develop a model where how does it move from the biosolids to the soil, to the water, to the crops at low concentrations, because it's not the same. And so Dr. Ian Pepper, University of Arizona, went through and found sites that either had historic data, so you had to have all the data on biosolids that had been land applied on your sites, or sites that had never had biosolids land applied, so that we could do a two-phase controlled study, first focusing on biosolids and soil concentration at all sites. Some sites had groundwater and stormwater data collected, but the second phase also looks at crop uptake from those lower concentration biosolids. And so it was a nationwide study, and Loudon Water participated, but we didn't have control over all of the data. But the data that we do have to share that we got specific data was from the Virginia plot. So this is the Warsaw AREC plot, and the work was, all the land application work was done by HRSD, but this was a site that had never had biosolids land applied. So it was ideal. The biosolids that we sent were the DC Water Bloom product. So you'll see at the bottom, DC Water has very low concentrations of PFOA and PFAS in their biosolids, because just like us, they're saying their data is showing 95% of their PFAS is coming from homes. It's just very little industrial contribution in this area. With the plots, the red plot on the left was our control. It had never had biosolids applied, and we didn't apply biosolids, and then did the same soil sampling as we did in two other plots. We're not showing you the low agronomic rate because it was just a lot of data on the slide. The results all look the same. We figured what everybody would care about was a little bit higher application rate. What if someone applied a little bit too much? So the right column is 2 times the normal agronomic rate. Because again, we're looking to create a model, so we wanted to get a spread. But what the data showed is there is PFOA and PFAS in the soil, irregardless of biosolids land application. And we believe right now that that's coming from rainwater and pesticides when biosolids aren't present. But what we also saw was the migration of PFOA and PFAS from those biosolids into the soil was very, very limited. The concentrations are still extremely low just in the soil. We don't have crop uptake rates yet from this site, but we are continuing to land apply and rotate crops as if a normal farmer would, trying to recreate the best real case scenario that we can while we continue to wait for more data to come out of the study. But what you can notice here is not all of this data makes sense. So if you look at the 6-foot depth for PFOA, there was actually higher PFOA without the biosolids than with. This is just data noise. These concentrations are so small that I really read that as an example of all these numbers should be interpreted as the same number, right? Because we're even smaller than 1 here. So we're just at the limits of what we can test for, and there is just data noise. But what we looked for was a relative scale of things. When we applied that PFOS, how big of an impact did it have to the soil? And we don't have groundwater for this site, unfortunately, but as more data comes out of the study, a larger picture we'll be able to put together. But this was a big takeaway for us in there are low levels of PFAS and biosolids that present a reasonable risk to continue land application because it's very close to baseline. It is still less than what we're seeing in human exposure, but lends us towards this is still a valuable resource, and we aren't contaminating the land that we're putting it on when you're in the right concentration range. But we do still believe that there needs to be some limits on this, right? So that we're not applying all biosolids. We want to apply those that are clean and acceptable to the environment.
And the difference between PFOA and PFAS?
They are just two different chemicals, so they just have two different arrangements of their carbon fluorine bonds.
We're talking about nanograms
Yeah.
per kilo. Really low level.
And I was gonna ask, how does that translate to the 4 parts per trillion?
Right, it's a great question. So the 4 parts per trillion in drinking water was based on a direct exposure. So to get to parts per trillion, you know, this is there's 2 zeros. Yeah, 2 more zeros to get to parts per trillion. But it's just not, you can't like interpret it from the drinking water standard because that standard was for direct consumption and we don't directly eat our biosolids. So higher concentrations are allowable. So the limits you're going to see are higher than the 4 parts per trillion. But that's because it is an indirect exposure rate. And so we don't have to be as restrictive on these concentrations.
What about, are we testing the crops that are grown on this field?
So yes, we've, soybeans were the first things that were grown and we're just waiting for those results to come back.
We would hypothesize that that would be a good way to figure out how the like you said, with drinking water, it's direct concentration.
Yes.
It might be substantially diluted by the plant itself, so.
Right. And there's actually a lot of science going on how plants uptake biosol or PFAS irrespective of this, but in those high concentration scenarios, because they wanted to understand it fast, not all crops uptake it the same. You're going to find it in different parts of different crops just based on their biology. But the other thing is, you know, the US FDA samples the national food supply for PFAS and they publish it on their website. And when they go into grocery stores, right, what they find PFAS in is fish because they're direct exposed to water and are consuming that. In the public food chain, they're not finding it in food crops, right? It's because very little biosolid.
Farm-raised fish or not wild caught, probably?
It's like all fish. And it's hard to know from the FDA studies, like where each sample they collected, but they've started doing specific fish samples, but a lot of the fish we eat comes from overseas, where there are less regulatory restrictions even.
No more fish.
Yeah, you have to, I know, I like my fish, but it really is, you know, if we look at what the public is at risk from, majority of it is the fish they're consuming. But the US EPA does have a process for determining the health limits for contaminants and biosolids. They are struggling with PFAS because it's hard to measure and it's in so many places, but what they look at, there are farm families. So they're not looking at the general public. They're looking at people who live on a farm and have the most direct exposure to farms. But they make assumptions there even that people, all the food they eat is right on their farm, right? That has PFAS concentrations in it. But the part they're missing, right, is, well, we can do it if they're only eating crops that were grown in really, really high concentrations of biosolids, right? They need these studies to say, well, if we set these limits, what is in the crops, right? That a farm family would be consuming that might actually inhale the biosolids and have more direct exposure than the general public would do.
So it's gonna take some time.
Yes. But I would say the good thing is we are finally seeing movement on the legislative level to get some limits in place. Now, rightfully so, DEQ has taken an approach where they wanted to wait on the US EPA. I think we all did. We all wanted a national approach. So there is no competition from state to state and worry that bad biosolids might be traveling to one state and not another. US EPA has just been unable to do that because the model was so hard to pull together. And then the current administration looks like they're going to withdraw the one model that was put out. So we're just not going to see, an answer to this come out nationally. So last year there was movement in Maryland and the legislation didn't pass, but this year we're seeing similar proposals here in Virginia, but the approach is very similar to the Michigan approach. So right now it's going to require, well, step number one is it's going to require monthly sampling of biosolids, which is absolutely needed, right? Michigan did that back in 2021. We need to know the scope of our problem. Loudon Water already does monthly sampling of our biosolids, so we're completely prepared for this and know what our data is going to look like, and we'll share it with you in a minute. The current House Bill 1433 is going to provide limits for PFOA and PFAS that can be land applied. This is what is being debated right now, is what those limits are. The current proposal as it stands has a firm cutoff at the 100 PPT that we saw at Michigan. The lower limit of it's fine to apply the biosolids is 25 PPT. What they're debating in the legislature is what happens in between there. Is there an intermediate limit where it's just applied at a lower rate? Is the limit phased in over time so that this happens slowly? Because Loudon Water is just fine. We are well below the 25 PPT, but not all municipalities in Virginia are. So they have to work out where their biosolids are going to go, is what they're trying to do in terms of making this.
Or where they're coming from too, like.
Yes, workable legislation, which that legislation is in here as well. But the other thing is public transparency. So the bill also includes a notification of PFAS concentrations and biosolids to the land appliers. We do want to build trust in biosolids. So we want the land appliers to know what is in the biosolids they are receiving. Because right now they're stuck. They're trying to support us and say, we do like using your biosolids, but it's scary not knowing, right? So we have to address that.
Well, it's going to create a market for the low concentrations.
Right. And so I've zoomed in on the Michigan data because we don't have Virginia data to kind of show the range that we're talking about. And I like the data because it illustrates this lower range is going to catch more utilities that maybe aren't those huge industries, but like you were saying, they need to go and start looking in their pretreatment systems, figuring out where these PFAS are coming from and what the solution might be. But it still leaves many communities, probably mostly residential, that have biosolids that can still be land applied. What this bill will do is finally by next year, we'll have a chart like this for Virginia. We'll be able to see Virginia biosolids and what our scales look like. But this is broad runs data. I zoomed into 2023. Which when we really took an uptick in frequency of sampling, and you'll notice 2025, we started monthly sampling, but we've got really very little variability going on in the PFOA. PFOA hovers down around 1, and our PFAS moves between 4 and 6. But we haven't found any industrial source or any pretreatment activity that we could do right now to lower these numbers. But we are confident in where we are compared to where the regulations are. The next bill is the sampling bill. So this is the industrial pretreatment bill that will require, last year, this bill came forward and it was just inquiring sampling from industries known to contribute PFAS. It got vetoed last year, so it didn't go through. So the bill was submitted again. It lists specific industries that would require sampling if they discharge into a POTW. For broad run, this will only trigger the landfill sampling, which we already have data on, but will need to be more regular. It doesn't go as far yet to say what level of pretreatment has to be done for landfills. Again, we were hoping that would come from national work that was being done on the pretreat level, but doesn't seem to be moving forward.
Does that mean
right now.
EPA is not gonna weigh in on this in any foreseeable future? Is that what I'm hearing, or?
All we can say is what we hear through unofficial channels, but what we hear right now is they're not moving forward with the landfill evaluation of pretreatment limits and that they're withdrawing what they had put in. I don't know what that means they're going to put back in its place.
Okay, so it's a big question mark.
Yeah. And that's why states are finally just saying, we're going to do this ourselves.
Not gonna wait.
As they should, as they should.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
But
And do we know the concentrations coming out of our landfill?
yes, and I can pull those up if you would like. I mean, they're high concentrations. The thing is, the flow is so small. It's just a relatively small load. Do you want me to see it? Do you want to see it?
Actually, you can just tell me the number.
Okay. Oh, I don't know. They're in the range of like, because there's so many PFAS, it's like 800 to 1,000 parts per trillion.
That's where we're way up there.
So
Mhm.
it's up there. But it's a small. number.
Yeah, and it makes it nice to treat because it's such a small flow. But it is aggressive wastewater, I would say, because it's so concentrated in so many things that it is hard on treatment
Sure, that's-
equipment.
Sure, it has all kinds of fun things and
Yeah.
heavy metals.
And so we'd already talked through this. This was just our slide on the source sampling. But there is a bill out that exists right now that is a ban on biosolids land application. It doesn't say it's a ban, but what it says is it doesn't allow biosolids that contain any trace of PFAS. And so you have to go through the story that we just went through today to understand that there's nothing in this world that doesn't have a trace of PFAS in it. So
They have to stop the rain.
Does
It is-
Senator Stewart understand that?
it is essentially, yes, he does. And what they're saying right now is they want to keep this bill open as a vehicle because eventually we have to reconcile the House bill that has the broader language in it with a Senate bill, and there isn't an equivalent Senate bill. But this is the language that stands right now that is going into committee this afternoon, which means as an industry, we don't know what the substitute is going to look like yet. And they haven't said they're not going to approve this yet. But Alex Renew this year did a statewide landfill survey to determine what the state's landfill capacity was for biosolids. And it's a little bit of a complicated answer, as always, because it depends on what percent of wet materials, what biosolids are considered, a landfill can accept. All landfills have different levels. The most common level in Virginia is about 2%, and that just keeps the slope of a landfill stable. If you take too much wet material, it compresses and the water comes out and makes the rest of the material around it unstable. The industry standard is not to exceed 5%, but we would have no control, right, over what a landfill decided, and we would not want them to accept something that would risk the safety of their staff. So if it remains at a 2% acceptance level and all biosolids in Virginia had to be landfilled right now, the landfill capacity for biosolids would be exceeded. There would be some of us left that did not have a place for our biosolids to go. The other challenge with this is they looked at it on a holistic approach. Many landfills only take material from within the county, so it doesn't mean any of us have the ability to send our biosolids wherever we would like. The landfill industry says that up to 5% is okay. So if they did that, we could get a couple of years of capacity storing biosolids, but that likely would not happen, right? The landfills likely would act to protect themselves from too much material that is difficult to handle. But this was a helpful study and the good statistic that's being taken down to Virginia just to make sure everybody understands that if they ban the land application, we have a larger problem.
And we've been very active on this, and through our association, our lobbyists are in the room with Senator and, making it really clear. So we're going to find out a lot more in the next couple of days on this one. So we'll probably have a good update at the board meeting on Thursday.
Do you think it'll be successful teaching technology to lawyers?
Are we gonna have a road trip down to Richmond?
We may be on some meetings virtually in the next day or two.
Good.
But I think as an industry, we all like to be prepared is our goal. So we have been participating with several other Northern Virginia utilities to look at, what is titled a biosolids feasibility study, but it is what is the future of biosolids treatment if land application is not viable, right? It could be not viable because of PFAS. It could be not viable because of microplastics, if those become the concern, right? We need to know what the next level is. And it was definitely something that made a lot of sense to do together as a group versus all of us trying to figure out the same thing at the same time. So we've been participating in this study for almost a year, and it looked at if we did a regional biosolids treatment, what would it be, right? What would address not only PFAS, but other emerging contaminants of concern? How would we govern this entity? Where might it be located? Because these are all super difficult. Like we could decide what it needed to be, but if we can't decide where it could be located, but we all felt that this is really what we need to be prepared and to get started in time to say if there's going to be a change, we need to start working on really the future
So this
of a
will be someplace
biosolids
that everybody sent their biosolids. for
That's what we're
some-
looking at.
Some more treatment.
Mhm. And the options are small in terms of those treatment technologies right now. And because it's even harder to measure PFAS in air than it is in water, there's some uncertainty as to whether incineration, for example, is just, moving it into the air. The studies are coming out, but it just needs some more time. So what this is looking at is how do we position ourselves now so that we can move when things are ready. And, just Loudon is participating. Everybody is participating for informational purposes, right? Nobody is signed or committed to a regional facility. We're all just looking together at what might a structure look like and how might it be possible. But many utilities are going to face this on their own, and many utilities haven't even started sampling PFAS. So
DC Water's not on here?
they are not. So this initial grouping was developed. First, it was just based on authorities because the contracting mechanisms are a little more flexible, and a couple of counties joined the group. It becomes much harder to do something regionally when you bring in the bigger utilities like DC Water or WSSC is also not on this list. And I think it is one of the challenges that we're seeing with this is building at this scale with so many different sludge streams is just a challenge. So I think it is one of the things that we've gone in circles with several times is who gets in and who doesn't of the Cool Kids Club.
So WSC and DC Water are shipping to farms in Virginia, right?
DC Water actually only sends very little in Virginia because the Virginia regulations are not as friendly to their material as in other places. So they actually go pretty far north on the East Coast with their material, but WSSC material is definitely.
I just go straight to the toilet.
And Chesapeake Bay, and then the Atlantic, yeah.
That was an unfunny joke.
I know, yeah. For the canal.
Yeah.
But that was really the end of what we had to talk to you about. I think we are being proactive, open, and collaborative throughout the industry, really trying to make sure that what we are land applying is the best quality material and is suitable for where it's going right now, and to make sure we have a plan for the future as situations change.
Thank you. It's a very, very thorough presentation. I have two questions, and I'm sure the other board members do too. Being an engineer, the testing of 4 parts per trillion is a very difficult thing to do, even in water. Do you accept the accuracy of the equipment that you're using?
That's why we've done so much sampling, was to make sure that, we feel confident in the data that we're getting. And we do with the specific lab we're working with, but we always have to review the data that we've received. We have received some data that we believe that the lab just had a contaminated machine that day because a PFAS that we'd never seen showed up in multiple samples, but not others. So it just takes practice in looking at the data. You can't take one sample and say, this is the answer. And then we're definitely not getting the same results from different labs. So we want to work with a lab that we know, we understand the data and what it means.
Is there any effort to bring in-house testing?
Loudon Water is currently, we have purchased the machine and are working on developing a method, but it takes a while. It will be a while before we bring it in-house. And even in-house, it would likely be on water long before we got into wastewater and other salts.
Okay, that's good. I really appreciate that. And then with this legislative information, when do you think we'll be able to get a report on the effect on us, maybe in the next meeting of this committee or maybe to the full board, because this is of interest?
Well, I think I mentioned up front, so we've got now a monthly report on legislative activities at each of the monthly board meetings while this session is going on. So it'll come back up again Thursday.
Yeah, we'll have an update on that.
Great. It's really important for us to keep, occasionally all of us get a question from board of supervisors will ask us, well, what's going on with PFAS? It's really interesting that it's out there. And of course, we see it in the legislature now. So thank you very much. Any other questions?
I have one question. How do they come across the fact that PFAS exists? I mean, all of a sudden they say, hey, here it is. I mean, how did the whole thing get started?
I don't know how it came out, but there are stories now that the manufacturers like 3M and DuPont knew a long time ago that the chemicals that they had, weren't good. But I don't know how it officially.
They don't break down over time easily. So
That's why they're called forever.
forever chemicals, right?
Do we have anything on our website about foundation and lipstick and things like that?
Yes.
We do, but, okay. So that's verified.
Good deal. This is really
I
good.
Google Loudon Water and PFAS all the time just to see what comes up.
Oh, okay. That's a good idea. I'll try that. Oh,
Is
yeah.
microplastics a thing? And we got all the pharmaceuticals that are, is that I know we don't have time to do that, but just real high level, is that a thing in our biosolids where we're measuring all that stuff too, or having problems?
So microplastics is a concern. Microplastics is also really difficult to measure because the measuring technique right now is you just try to sieve it out and count them. So it's highly inaccurate, right? Because they're so small and they're doing it under a microscope, even more complicated in biosolids. But we are participating in, these are university level studies because there's no certified method. So we have sent some samples off to get microplastics measured. Haven't seen anything back yet, but the industry consensus coming back is that surprisingly, where you see high microplastics, you're also seeing high PFAS. So just the coexistence of industrial sources, right? High contributors, that sort of thing. But in terms of broad runs effluent, we're feeling relatively confident because of the microfiltration with the membranes followed by the carbon filtration that the kind of initial study looked quite positive in terms of that. But in biosolids, I'm not sure how long it'll be before we can even see what's in them.
Yeah, biosolids. But how about drinking water?
Yeah, do you measure the intake?
That's a really great question. I saw the broad run results for the micro study of microplastics, but I don't know that I saw anything on the drinking water, but I can
Yeah.
check on that.
Just the physics. I mean, that may be another topic that we could for this committee. How how small are the, I didn't get it when I did some research, how small of a filter would you have to get to be able to filter out microplastic?
Small.
I think it would be reverse osmosis.
And that's too much.
Yeah.
And that's too much, yeah, wow, yeah.
Hey, with the Potomac Interceptor break, what would have happened if that was upstream from all the intakes? If that same break had happened, before Leesburg, would we have all had to shut down all of the intakes below that sort of sewage leak?
It would be similar to other kind of contamination alerts that we have had in the past.
Yeah, and
So we
like ours wouldn't be affected. It's not it
So even
wouldn't.
if 3 miles up the stream from us, that interceptor had broke, it was spilling.
Well, the Potomac Interceptor isn't located at all upstream of ours.
You've
but-
given a hypothetical.
Or what if Frederick County, Maryland's had a break and raw storage
Yeah.
right into
We have a lot of flexibility, right? So for our water treatment system, we would shut down trap, but we could pull from Goose. We could pull from the Beaver Dam reservoirs, which would, nice thing about those reservoirs not being contaminated, right? Fairfax Water would just have to monitor. They would,
Right.
they
And
would monitor.
they've got one they've got a couple, right, on the shoreline, but they've got
one
one
in the middle. Yeah.
in the middle. And so, they would just look at all of that, and they've got probably contingency plans.
So we need to get the milestone online as soon as possible.
Closer than it's ever been,
Yes, indeed.
framed to the pump station.
That's right.
Someone asked me that.
Good question.
Pharmaceuticals though are not in the biosolids.
Oh, I don't know
Don't know,
of a
that's okay.
test for that either. Yeah, but thinking about the science of it, there's likely going to be some there.
I have one more question. It seems in your presentation, there's a tremendous effort at the end product. Is there an equal effort with manufacturers to keep them from using it in the first place?
There are numerous chemical ban bills being proposed.
And there's that class action lawsuit, which is helping.
Oh, that's true.
You need a new case to get that thing.
He needs a new case. So the next item on the agenda is to set a time and date and some topics for our next meeting. I was thinking that June might be a good time frame.
Yeah, I mean, we can, see where some of this is going. We also will be working on the agenda for the board retreat, which is in that same time frame. So, one of the things last year, there can be overlap there, and we've got that venue as well. So we'll continue to kind of look at that.
And we were also talking at one point about brainstorming, Western solutions as well. At the
Yes.
meeting.
That would likely, I would say that's likely going to be something at the retreat, that, because there'll be activities between now and then.
No, a solution,
I understand. That isn't.
not a Band-Aid.
Not a Band-Aid, right, got it. So if there are no more questions, I think that we're looking for a
Motion to
motion
adjourn. I'll
adjourned.
make that.
I've got one real
Oh,
quick that's
sure.
unrelated, if it's okay. Could we, on our website, link to DC Water's like current info on this whole spill? It's on, the AP, the Associated Press. I mean, like national outlets are picking up this story. It's the nation's capital. And I go on loudandwater.com and I'm just pretending to be Mr. Smith living wherever. And I can't find anything. And I don't find anything on Fairfax Water either. So it's not like it's just us. There's just kind of a silence, which always makes the public feel uneasy that, oh, they're hiding something from me, even though we're not. It's not our thing. It's not our pipe and all this stuff. But that's the world we live in. It's a jaded public. And DC Water's got their little latest blurb about, whatever the current status is. But maybe we could just link that up there. I know we also want to be sensitive because DC Water's our partner. So we're not trying to make a big splash or something like this, make them feel like we're drawing unnecessary attention to it. But it is everywhere in terms of the news. And you have all these environmental groups that have been focused on the Chesapeake Bay and the Potomac, and they're all freaking out. Like we just have raw sewage going into the Potomac, and it's like, well, can't do anything about it or something like this. So at a minimum, if we could just have a link there and something where you don't have to go hunt for it, on 10 different pages, just right there. Go see what DC Water's saying about it. Might be nice. And I think that gives us credibility that we're a source when there is an environmental spill. You go, where would I turn? I don't want to turn to my state DEQ necessarily. I'd like to be able to go to Loudon Water, and Loudon Water will at least provide me information, direct me where I need to go, something like that.
So you're suggesting that not to do a direct link to the other website, but to actually import their information onto our website?
No, I actually was
Yeah.
suggesting that we link to theirs. I don't
But then
know the
then
coding
you're
of it,
leaving-
but
Then you're leaving Loudon Water's site.
understood.
Okay.
But for somebody who's one of our customers and has a sense that we're pretty interlinked here in the DC area, we buy so much water from the east, and to just, at least at a minimum, be able to get brought up to speed there from whatever DC Water's publishing. The other question for a future time is just what the financial implications potentially might be for us. Is DC Water's out there publicly going, hey, we haven't had enough money to keep up our infrastructure. They're pointing fingers at a money problem. And we're partially affected if they go, well, we're raising rates or costs or special assessments for all our partners. We're sending 60%.
They did raise their rates.
Well, this is gonna, I mean, there's gonna be fallout from this. And so is it 60? That's the number in my head. I could be wrong.
We've
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah, 60% of our sewers going to DC. So, you know, at a minimum, there's some financial risk maybe for us, and maybe it's small, maybe they go, well, I don't know, I'll leave it, but that's something maybe to talk about in the future.
Yeah, so we've had
Maybe on
a couple
Thursday.
conversations since the spill with DC Water, but prior to the spill, their 10-year CIP has $645-ish million for PI rehab in there. And a good portion of that is in Loudoun County and in our service area. And further down, then it gets all allocated based on how much capacity you have in the system. So in our 10-year CIP, you see DC Water spike in the next several years, and it's a direct result of that. So it is in our plan that we are anticipating to pay higher bills for our capacity in the next several years. The indication that we got, at least right now, was they didn't think there would be much of an impact at the moment because this had already been planned to be rehabbed and part of that. But I'm sure there will be some cost as they do repairs and cleanup that will be shared by all the utilities.
as an emergency.
And I know we try to increase our treatment load, right, at Broad Run, take a little
Yep.
pressure off that. That worked out well.
Yeah, and we've kept it up.
Is there the potential for remediation costs to come back to us, some portion, some share?
They've not had any conversations about that yet. I think they're so focused on solving the problem
Sure.
and that. So we've not had any conversations about whether remediation costs would be included or not.
It-
You go
Perhaps
ahead, Al.
if it were to occur, though, I'm sure that, all O&M costs
Mhm.
or capital costs borne by DC would come to the users as their percentage share. So it's likely.
So the agreement, just how it's structured, if they had to shell out money for remediation to the Potomac or whatever our share of that is going to get billed back to us.
I think that would be.
That would be our guess at the moment. Yeah.
Okay.
Be interesting to know if they're insured.
I don't know. So we had a motion to adjourn. And did we get a second?
Uh,
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Somebody's got to get to the airport.